Hello and welcome to the Forum. I'm John Mattison. On this week's show, we'll devote the whole show to the economy and to President Cyril Ramaphosa's recovery plan. It's so important to our future in this difficult time that it's worth delving into what it means and what it doesn't mean. My guest is the political economist J.P. Landman. He earned a bachelor's and a law degree from the University of Stellenbosch. He's had 2 stints at Harvard, 1 at Oxford. He then did a master's degree in future studies. He's a member of the President's National Planning Commission. JP, welcome to the Forum.
Thank you, John. Good morning. Thank you very much.
JP, I call you South Africa's, I think of you as South Africa's most optimistic economist. You see a lot of good in the you see a lot of good in the recovery plan, and you say that too many commentators make the same mistake, what you call WYSIATI. What you see is all there is, that the public see only part of the plan and they get it wrong.
Yes. Yeah, the concept of Wishiati, John, comes from Daniel Kahneman, the psychologist who got a Nobel Prize for economics for work that he and his late partner, Amos Tversky, did on decision making, how we take decisions.
Yes.
That's not really important. One of the what is important is that one of the mistakes that we make when we evaluate things is Wishiati. What you see is all there is. And so we look at the budget and what we see is SAA, and we don't see more than that. And then we look at the budget and we say it looks very bad, which of course it does, no question about that. But outside the budget, there is also the recovery plan. And outside the budget and outside the recovery plan, there are things like the expropriation bill, which came to Parliament in October. So I think there are a lot of other things going on outside of the budget, which gives me personally a very good indication, I think, of where the government is going, and it's the direction that I like.
Now, we're going to go into the specifics of that, but before we do, your position is that the work that the president's been putting in since 2018 means that we will see a real benefits, at least by 2022.
Yeah, and I think that's correct. I would agree with that number, absolutely. The things that needs to be done in South Africa are deep structural changes. We don't have to waste time on that. You and I and our viewers know exactly what those structural problems are, and it'll take time to clear them. It's not a quick job. It's not a quick job. And I think by 2022, we will see a significant change in energy, electricity specifically. Maybe gas, but electricity specifically. We will see a big change in spectrum. And I think depending on what happens, we could see an improvement in the world economy, and all of that should help us. We should do much better by 2022.
Now, I want to come back to all of those things, but first, sort of a basic question. You know, there are people who say, I mean, we've had a period of talking about job summits and so on, but you would say certainly that first of all, you can't get jobs if you don't have economic growth, and that growth doesn't come from the budget changes, but from restructuring the economy itself, sector by sector.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you can get some jobs from public employment programs. You can get some jobs from what we can call social employment. No question about that. But that's not the game changer. The game changer when it comes to jobs is you need a bigger economy. If you have, before COVID, 16 million people employed in our economy, and you want to employ 20 million, you want to employ 4 million more, you will be hard-pressed to employ 4 million more people in the same size economy. It's just not going to happen. If you want to employ 4 million more people, you need a bigger economy. It's as simple as that. Again, I repeat that I think there is a role for public employment, there is a role for social employment, but then again, you're dependent on the budget, and we all know what the state of the budget is. So yes, you need a bigger economy, and where we are now at the moment, how do you get a bigger economy? Well, you must grow more. How do you get more growth? Well, you can stimulate more demand, so interest rates can drop very low. That the Reserve Bank has done. And then you could try, government can spend a bigger budget deficit, spend money that they don't have in effort to stimulate growth. But we all know that that game has been played out. In 2009, when the global economic crisis was just behind us, Pravin Gordhan became Minister of Finance. He did the right thing. He increased budget deficit spending in an effort to bring growth up after the 2008 crisis. The problem is we never stopped spending. So in 2010, 11, 12, 14, and so on, we kept up those levels of spending. It's now 10 years later, and I'm afraid every single number that we have, employment, growth, investment, you name it, every single number that we have tell us that we've run out of growth steam. And the only way to get that back is to do structural reforms in the economy.
And I mean, you believe that President Ramaphosa has got his arms around the problem and even around his partners, so that, we see a lot of disunity in cabinet. We see Pravin Gordhan say one thing and Tito Mboweni seem to say something different. But you believe that Ramaphosa actually has effectively brought a unified plan.
That's what it looks like. The things on which Tito and Pravin Gordhan differ is SAA, and that is indeed a philosophical difference, I think. But they don't disagree on the essentials of structural reform. It is Pravin, as Minister of Public Enterprises, who has initiated and who's driving the change at Eskom. It is Pravin, as Minister of Public Enterprises, who's driving the change at Transnet to allow private investors into the use of railway lines. So I don't think he is that far apart from Mboweni when it comes to the Treasury's document, the famous Treasury document. And John, if I say I think the President is on top of it, let's just look a little bit at what happened around that Treasury document. Right. It was released in August 2019. It's about 14 months ago. When it was released, there was an enormous contestation. There's one very senior investment banker who called it, who said it in a Twitter message that this is Treasury going rogue. That's quite a serious statement to make, Treasury going rogue. That was 14 months ago. What happened in February this year? Well, it was announced that the whole cabinet has adopted this Treasury paper and it's now become government policy. What happened in October? Well, the President in his recovery plan said not only will there be action around the Treasury plan, he himself personally, together with Mboweni, will oversee the implementation of the plan. Now, all of this happened in 14 months. 14 months ago, no go, rogue, forget about it, will never happen. 14 months later, official policy, President overseeing himself the implementation. And I think that's a pretty clear indication of where political will is. You see exactly the same thing on energy. When Mr. Ramaphosa, President Ramaphosa, in February 2019, it's only about 20 months ago, announced his plans for Eskom, there were two reactions. The one reaction was, this is nonsense, it means nothing, which is, of course, absolutely not true. People who were a little bit better informed said, no, this is fine, but it won't happen. There are too many vested interests. And indeed, the vested interests did come out and they did oppose it with protests, with court cases, with political activism. In the end, the court cases were dismissed right up to the appeal court in Bloemfontein. The protests speeded out and Eskom is being restructured. In March this year, Gwedi Mantashe, who was Minister of Mining, but also chairperson of the ANC, said, there's no argument about it anymore. Eskom will be divided into 3 units. So I think Mr. Ramaphosa has built a remarkable political consensus around Eskom, around energy, and around structural reform. Now, of course, he was helped by a few things. He was helped by the fact that we've got load shedding and everybody could see there's a problem in the electricity industry. He was helped by the fact that we were downgraded. People understand intuitively that we've got to do something. We can't just carry on the same road. He was to some extent helped by the disaster of COVID, because again, we understand that we've got to do something serious here. So I'm not denying the outside influences, but I think what we are seeing is that Mr. Ramaphosa has mobilized these developments quite effectively in building a consensus for where he wants to go. And you see it most dramatically illustrated in the expropriation bill. Remember, the ANC took a resolution that there must be expropriation of land without compensation.
Right.
That was in 2017, almost 3 years ago. For a long time now, we've lived with this thing, and all kinds of developments took place. Focus on the bottom line. The bottom line is that in October last month, the expropriation bill was published, and it provides for no rand compensation in certain cases. Esma Gashula at that time, when the bill was released, was in KZN, and he said, as far as he's concerned, this bill fulfills the ANC's resolution on the issue.
Right.
At the same time, business was happy. The investment circles were happy. Our colleagues your colleagues in journalism and so on were happy. Two things. One, I think it's quite an achievement to take a resolution like that and turn it around to the point where, from the Secretary General of the ANC right through to business and investment people saying, this is fine, we can live with this. That's considerable political skill. And that is played out over the last 3 years. So yes, I'm happy that Ramaphosa is in charge, that he's got his hands around the problem, that he understands the importance of the reform that we need to undertake, and that we will see a lot of that in the next couple of years. I want to say something about infrastructure, John, but let me stop there in case you want to go in.
Let's take a quick break, and then I want to come back, talk to you about infrastructure, but I also want to talk to you about energy and green energy. We'll be right back. And we're back talking to JP Landman about the National Recovery Plan. JP, you were talking about energy, and the one part I wanted to pursue with you is green energy, because I've seen your analysis, and you're saying that by 2030 there'll be a massive increase in the amount of green energy we're providing.
Yeah, that is what is provided for in the government's IRP, the Integrated Resource Plan. So that's as per their plan and as per their calculations. I think they are a bit conservative. I think we will see more green than what they allow for. But essentially, just to pick up your point, at the moment, 95% of our energy effectively comes from coal, from fossil fuels. And you can just turn those two digits around. By 2030, in terms of the IRP, the number will be 59%. Now, 59% is still high, but it's a very big decline from 95. And as I say, I think those numbers are conservative. Why do I say that? I say it because the numbers are based on Eskom achieving a 75% energy availability factor. Now, they're not achieving that. They're running, there were some months this year where they were running at 70%, 71%. But as a general rule, they run below 70% with the energy availability factor. Now, if you make a long-term plan and your assumption is 75, but in reality you do less than 70, it means that you will do less fossil fuel, less coal, and you will do more renewable. I think that's clearly the way the wind is blowing.
And you're confident that the implementation will happen?
Oh, absolutely. No doubt about that. The framework is now in place. We've seen long delays over the last 12 months. They've been irritating. They've been even obstructive, I would say. But we are now at a point where 16,000 megawatt can be added to the grid. over the next 4 years or so, and then more after 2024. So yes, no, I think the evidence is quite clear. You can break the current supply into three batches. There's the 2,000 emergency power, which will be online by the middle of next year, and which will probably be gas. That's what the indications are. The auction is closing on the 15th of, it was the end of November. It's now been postponed to just the day before Christmas. So by the end of the year, we will know the auction, we will know what the prices will be, and we will know to what extent it will be gas. Then there's 2,000 megawatts extra that's being procured from current suppliers of wind and solar energy. The president announced that in the recovery plan in his speech. So that gives you 4,000, and then there's 11,813. Let's make it 12,000, for which the tenders documents are now being prepared. They will come out by the end of December, and that bidding will probably take place in the first quarter of next year. So you're talking 16,000 megawatts on its way. Now, of course, we must just be a little bit careful. 1 megawatt of renewable power is not equal to 1 megawatt of a coal-fired power.
Right.
There is a difference.
Right.
But nevertheless, it's a big swing, and it's clear which way we're going.
And it's become cheaper than coal. And also, I mean, people often talk about an investment strike. But the point is, if the right investment is there, the money is there. And my understanding is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the investment funds are there, both domestically and foreign investment. When it comes to green energy, people are willing to put up the money.
No question about it, John. And you saw it in the expressions of interest for the 2,000 megawatts emergency power. 481 companies expressed an interest in investing in that. Now, let's apply the normal 80-20 rule. Let's say 80% is rubbish and chances and so on and so forth, and only 20% are good. Then you still talk more than 90 companies that are serious about coming in and grabbing a portion of that 2,000 megawatts. If you look back, the renewables that we've had to date is more than 200 billion rand of investment, of which almost 50%, I think the number is 44 or 42%, were overseas investors. That's for the programs that are already installed, the wind and the solar energy. So no, there's no question that there's enormous local and foreign interest. The money will come in and we will see the investment. The problem up to now was people were not allowed to invest.
Right. There were all sorts of delays. And what does this mean for jobs? I know people talk about a just transition from coal jobs to clean energy jobs. How do you see the impact on jobs? Will it create more jobs?
Well, I think there are two elements. The first one is jobs that you create on a solar farm or a wind farm. But then it goes a bit wider. If you do what we're doing now, and that is to have a 10, 20-year plan, then you can also create a lot of jobs in manufacturing, where the components for these renewable energy plants can be manufactured locally. You know that there was a factory in Durban that produced renewable energy components. They had to close down because there wasn't a consistent enough investment and therefore demand for their product. So it's not just what's happening on the wind plants and the solar plants themselves, it's also what's happening in manufacturing. But then there's a third one, and that's what's happening in the rest of the economy. John, nobody will argue that load shedding and not having electricity and the uncertainty of energy security is a big constraint of the economy.
Yes,
you remove that constraint and you can get jobs in mining, you can get jobs in tourism, you can get jobs wherever. In manufacturing, you can get jobs in construction. So it's not just about jobs in the electricity industry. It's what electricity enables you to do outside electricity in other jobs. And that's where I think the big change will be. The minute this country can go back to where we were before 2008, when load shedding started, if we can go back to 2007, when the concept load shedding was not around, I think you will see huge dividends in the rest of the economy.
So now you alluded to this. We actually set up companies that were manufacturing solar components, and those closed down. You see those opening again?
Yeah, absolutely. Remember why they closed down? They closed down because Eskom, under the Gupta regime, refused to sign contracts with IPPs, with independent power producers. That's where this gemors started. Now, because contracts were not signed, the IPPs, the independent power producers, did not build plants. Because they didn't build plants, they did not order solar panels and other components from the factories you're referring to. Now you're on a completely different trajectory. Now you've got an IRP that gives you a clear road of what's going to happen in the next 10 years. We've just briefly discussed those numbers. You now know that you can open the factory in for the next 10 and 20 years. You're going to have a demand for your product. I think it's an entirely different ballgame now.
Right. And now I want to sort of raise a sort of a cheeky addition to this, because this is a kind of Green New Deal issue. And you've referred to the fact that our car manufacturing sector has grown. And that's obviously great to see. But we seem to be behind in moving to electric cars. Shouldn't we as a country, as a government, be rolling out charging stations throughout the country and integrating that with our automotive industry to start producing electric cars? Otherwise, won't we be left behind again?
Yeah, we should. One must ask yourself the question whether that's the biggest priority. I don't have a view about that, John. It would be nice, but I think what is more important at the moment is to get our basic electricity transmission system in order. We've got to upgrade distribution. We know of many municipalities where the distribution of power maintenance is not good. So I would think those things are more important than having plug points for electric cars. Let's get the basics right first, then the rest will follow. I have no doubt that electric cars will become cheaper. The technology will become easier. So I think we can take 3 or 4 years to spend on the real priorities, other priorities, and then in due course we can catch up. We've got a lot of basic things that we've got to fix.
Yes, that makes complete sense to me. You've got to get the basics right. But I guess, of course, I wouldn't mind us leapfrogging and getting ahead of the game a little bit. You started talking about infrastructure, and of course that means, again, infrastructure is a kind of economic activity that can really boost growth and jobs in ways that sort of expanding the public service doesn't do. So it's much better long-term initiative. Are we into? But we've been talking about infrastructure for so long. Is it going to happen this time?
Well, a very good point. If we talk about infrastructure, what exactly are we talking about? The things that we've been discussing about energy and electricity, that's clearly infrastructure, and that's good. Spectrum is another one. You yourself were involved in that, and you know what enormous benefits can come from there. So I think electrical or electricity infrastructure, spectrum, telecommunications infrastructure, we're going to, the changes there are very clear already. We've got a clear line of sight on them. Then there's the railways. So what I would call economic infrastructure, spectrum, electricity, railways, ports, we can add ports to it. Those things are incredibly important for sustained economic development. Yesterday I was talking to somebody from the Minerals Council. Do you know that we transport iron ore via rail to the ports, but a lot of the iron ore that we export is actually transported to Maputo via road. You've got these enormous trucks, they destroy the roads, it's expensive, it's slow. One single train can replace all of that. So it's very important that we get railway infrastructure sorted out. And that's a function of both management as well as CapEx. And I think that's clearly on the agenda. So yes, that's very important. Where I want to give a word of caution, the choice the government has made, and that's a very important choice. The choice that government has made is that they're not doing prescribed assets, which a lot of people have been asking for, but they're doing joint ventures with the private sector. Now, that's very good. But to have joint ventures between government and private sector is not an easy story. It's complicated. It's very intricate, legally speaking.
I'm going to have to. I'm going to have to interrupt you. We have to take a break, but we'll be right back with JP Lutman. And we're back with JP Landman. We were talking about infrastructure and rail, but I remember also we had, I think it was the only General Electric railway plant outside of the United States was built in South Africa, and that was going to be our big expansion into producing our own railway stock in South Africa. And that failed, I think, also during the period of corruption. Is that gone, or is that possible to bring back?
No, as far as I know, that is still running, but I'm not 100% up to speed on that, John. There was also a decision by the African Union that South Africa should be the hub for railway rolling stock, particularly locomotives. So it's not just our own market; it's also the market north of us. My understanding is that those two factories are coming along.
Because that's exactly the kind of synergy South Africa needs. We should be producing heavy machinery and light machinery for Africa. That should be an obvious way for South Africa to grow, shouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. No, manufactured exports, we are very competitive in Africa when it comes to manufactured exports. We are very competitive, and we just need to expand that. I think the problem with Africa is not that we don't have the products or that we don't have the entrepreneurs. I think the problem is more one of logistics, roads, bridges. The opening up of the Kazungulu Bridge between Botswana and Zambia, I think, is incredibly important. Checkers now doesn't have to take products into Africa via Zimbabwe or via the long road via Mozambique. They can just take the shortcut through Botswana. So practical things like that, how long it takes you to clear a border post, how long it takes you to clear the paperwork at the border and so on, those things can play a big role in promoting our exports into Africa.
Yeah. Now, while we're talking about new products, there also seems to be great capacity for dacha, of cannabis, hemp, both for medicinal purposes, perhaps recreational purposes, but also hemp as a product for manufacturing of textiles.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the items in the President's Recovery Plan, I didn't even discuss it, is a regulatory framework to establish a hemp and cannabis industry. And I think the deadline, I'm not sure, John, but I think the deadline is within 6 months. Then the regulatory framework must be there. And then, of course, it will take time to get it processed and so on. And some people will object. Many people would not like the idea. But that's the kind of thing that we need to do. That could be a very interesting new product market, which will help rural areas in particular very, very much.
And black farmers have the expertise.
Yeah, they know how to grow them.
Yeah, and of course, it's become a serious industry in Canada, Australia, properly regulated. It should be an asset for us.
Yes.
Now, I wanted to move on. You've also, in reading what you've been saying and writing, textiles and clothing seems to be an area we can. You're arguing for revival. Am I correct in thinking that we lost a lot of our clothing sector and textile sector at a time in the Mbeki era when we went for a free trade policy we accepted the World Trade Organization? Some of my friends in Parliament said we went even further than the WTO required. And this really, we lowered the tariffs too fast. And that destroyed a lot of our businesses and a lot of jobs. Is that revivable, and can you do it within a free trade environment?
Look, I think that's absolutely correct. Broadly, I agree with that arrangement. It was in January 1994, I think, could have been February, that South Africa adopted the Marrakesh Agreement. And the Marrakesh Agreement was was the beginning of the WTO, and there was a worldwide agreement about tariffs. So we adopted that. So we were under obligation to reduce our tariffs in South Africa considerably, and we've done that. And in some areas, we've done it even faster. Your friends are quite right. We've done it faster than what was required.
Was that a mistake?
Sorry?
Was that a mistake?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. If you're going to a destination, you will get there whether you drive a little bit faster or a little bit slower. So we got there a little bit slower. I think it was particularly brutal. And some industries like shoe wear and textiles were very, very hard hit. On the other hand, I think it forced us into a new paradigm very quickly. So, what is is. Bill Clinton used to say, in politics you start where you are. And we now have this worldwide regime, and we must work with it. And I think what we can learn from the world is, not from everybody, but certainly from some countries, it is how smart your state is. And if you want to compete in the modern world, it's not about how big or small your state is. I think that's an entirely irrelevant question. It is how smart your state is, how capable the state is. And with smart policies, you can actually achieve a lot. Now, I know it's not maybe not popular to say it, John, but the biggest period of industrial growth that we had in South Africa was between 1923, more or less, and the middle 1960s, for that 40 years. That's the period in which we built Eskom, we built ISCOR into a highly successful steel industry. The IDC was established. That's the period in which South Africa industrialized. And how did we industrialize? Well, you industrialize by taking particular sectors, putting the best possible management in, and building them and driving them. Never with the intention that you protect these industries forever, but that you help them to get going. And that was the period when we had what you could call an Afrikaner developmental state. Right. And that Afrikaner developmental state served South Africa well, served Afrikaners well, but it certainly serves South Africa well as well. So I believe there's room for that kind of thinking in the modern world. And for that, you need a smart state. And I'm delighted to hear that the president is talking more and more and is prioritizing more and more the issue of a capable state, because that's what will make or break this issue.
And that means working on the quality of our civil service.
It means working on the quality of our civil service. It means creating stability. This thing where the tenure of a director general in South Africa is about 2.6 years in a job is absolutely inconceivable. You take a big department like police, almost 200,000 employees. Go and ask any manager in the private sector, how do you manage 200,000 people? And the answer is with great, great difficulty. Now, on top of that, you hire and fire DGs almost, every 2.5 years, every 2.6 years. You cannot build a state like that. I think we should take a leaf out of the book of the Germans. It was Friedrich the Great who in the 18th century brought in entrance exams for his civil servants. The British had entrance exams into their civil service a long time ago already. And I think that's the kind of things we can do. Give security of tenure to DGs and let only people come in who've passed exams.
The same applied in Japan and China.
There you are. There you are.
I want to, before we leave the Afrikaner development state entirely, ISCOR, when we came in 1994, in the time of WTO and so on, we sold off ISCOR, and that was our iron and steel, and that was intended as a backbone to manufacturing. Was it a mistake for us to sell it?
I don't think I don't think the board of directors had a choice at the time when it was sold. I think it was effectively bankrupt. I think you must go one step back. ISCOR was a company that existed of two legs. The one was steel making, Pretoria and Van der Bijl Park and down in the KZN. But the other leg was mining. And they got the iron ore out of the ground, they put it into their steel mills and they produced steel. Now the first thing what happened was there was a raid led by what we would call today private equity people. Yes. And they said there's a lot of value in ISCOR, which is not utilized, which has not been unlocked. We want to buy the shares, we'll take the company over, we'll fire the board, and the first thing we're going to do is to split mining and steel making. And that is what happened. The mining component became what is today Exaro, of course, much bigger than just what Iscor had, but that's Exaro, and then Iscor itself. And then we had a long period, John, where there was no investment. If you want to talk about an investment strike, I think we could say that there was an investment strike in the South African steel industry. Because after we've sold it, it was all about getting our dividends and so on.
Yeah.
And what we know today is that in China, but also in the United States, you have a range of smaller steel mills that are up to date, best technology, latest technology, and they're doing quite well. In fact, in South Africa, we sit with the anomaly that we've got an import tariff to protect Iscor. And who are we protecting Iscor against? We're protecting them against steel mills in China who are ultra modern and can provide the same product at a cheaper price. Now, I don't know why the government is so married to Iscor. I think there are better ways of dealing with it. But you've got blocks like Iscor and SAA where I just don't understand government thinking. It's time for a new approach.
We have to take a break, but just a quick question before we do. Is there scope for smaller, modern steel manufacturing in South Africa?
Well, that's my understanding. That is what happened in the States, in America, and that's my understanding of what the Chinese have done. I'm not a steel industry expert, but there's certainly scope. That's what happened in other countries. I can't see why it can't happen here.
Yeah. We have to take a break. We'll be back in a moment with JP Landman. And we're back talking to political economist JP Landman. JP, just to round off the discussion about the economic recovery plan of the president, I noticed you talked about something I'm afraid I'm not properly familiar with. There is a component of it which is job creation along the lines of the old New Deal of Franklin Roosevelt in America in the 1930s. And you say that President Ramaphosa used as a model what he'd done in the private sector when he was running that company Shanduka, and it was called the Black Umbrellas. Can you tell me what that was and how it's being applied now?
What I remember from the Shanduka programs quite a number of years ago, John, was that the Shanduka went out under the program Black Umbrellas, and they tried to get black entrepreneurs, black businesses connected as suppliers to bigger businesses. So you would have, for example, I'm just using an example, you would have, say, a stationery provider or an electrical company or whatever, providing services to Anglo-American. It's connecting supplier and consumer of the product. And this, from everything that I've read, was quite a successful program. Now, one of the things that was agreed at NEDLAC, and which is part of the recovery plan, is that big business in South Africa will embark on these kinds of developmental programs. Now, some companies like Anglo-American has done it for a long time, and I'm sure there are others as well. I'm sure if you go to Sasol, you'll probably also find it. So it's not a unique idea, it's not a new idea, but when I read it in the recovery plan, I did have this flashback in my memory that was exactly what Shanduka did with their Black Umbrellas program. And I think that's the kind of intervention, if you want, that the government would like to do, to take more effort to build up small black businesses, and they can become big as well, to connect them with the current market, and in that way try and get them to be sustainable. You have a similar problem in agriculture. If you're a small farmer, excuse me, if you're a small farmer, an emerging farmer, it's okay. You can have a product, you can have a piece of land, you can work it, you have your products. How do you get them to the market? How do you get them to the specifications in the market? Because the clients at Woolworths and the clients at Pick and Pay and the clients at ShopRite Checkers all are used to a certain minimum standard of product. How do you help your small farmer to reach that standard and link up with the Woolworths and the Checkers and so on? And I think that's what that program is about. You would have noticed in my note that I was cautious. I was saying, let's not go overboard with this. We won't see quick results, but I think the intent is good, and it's a good thing that they are putting up such programs.
Right. I want to link up two different concepts. The one is the poison pills of the Jacob Zuma era at Nasrec, at the Congress, the ANC Congress, where he got policies adopted which he never applied himself, but he left for President Ramaphosa to be forced to do, even though that there was no funding arranged for them, like free university, land expropriation, and of course SAA was approved at that time. And you're obviously arguing that President Ramaphosa it's taken time because it was a lot of political hot potatoes that were left, as I say, to mix my metaphors, a poison pill to leave the next president. But you say he's navigated those effectively and built support among the alliance partners.
Absolutely. Look at the expropriation bill. We discussed it earlier today. He's defanged that. The toxins have been taken out of that bill, clearly. If you look at the Reserve Bank issue, one of the Nasrec resolutions in 2017 was that the Reserve Bank must be nationalized. That is still an ANC position, but that has been taken care of.
Can we just stop on the nationalization of the Reserve Bank? Because I actually once met someone who was a shareholder in the Reserve Bank, and it was quite apparent to me that it was meaningless. The Reserve Bank is governed by regulation and law, and who's the actual shareholder is really not a significant thing.
You're quite right. I'm a shareholder. I've got 200 shares in the Reserve Bank. It means absolutely nothing.
Gives you no power at all. You don't control my money, do you?
No, unfortunately not, John. No, it's a totally meaningless concept, number one. Number two, I think one must distinguish between ownership and mandate. Now, there's the week of, I think it was 4 to 6 June in 2019. It was about a month or so after the elections. In that week, the Reserve Bank issue was driven to its climax, and it was defanged. If I may just remind you what happened, there was an ANC National Executive Committee meeting on the Tuesday morning. I think it was the 4th of June. S1Ep7, in his capacity as Secretary General, gave a press conference in which he infamously referred to quantity easing. He meant quantitative easing. But the press statement said quantity easing, and he referred to the Reserve Bank and so on and so forth. He was slapped down or repudiated by the Minister of Finance the same day or the next day. But here is the important point. 48 hours later, on the Thursday, the 6th of June, if I remember correctly, the top 6 of the ANC issued a statement from the Thule House saying the mandate of the Reserve Bank will not be changed. The policies of the Reserve Bank will be determined by the governor in consultation with the Minister of Finance, which is the traditional position. And thirdly, although it is our view that the Reserve Bank should be in public ownership, we don't have the resources for that now. And that statement was issued by the top 6, of which S1Ep7 was one. Don't forget it. That evening at 10 o'clock on S1Ep7's website, he put the statement of the NEC, of the top 6 rather, not the NEC, the top 6, and he said, comrades, this is now our line of march. So the Reserve Bank issue, a contentious resolution from 2017, was dealt with in June 2019. The expropriation bill, another contentious item from 2017, was decisively dealt with this October, last month. And so we can carry on. Now, I think the higher education story, you're quite right. Even the Minister of Finance at the time, Malusi Gigaba, did not know that it was coming. It caught him by surprise. He had to put up the VAT rate from 14% to 15% to try and deal with this. And it's quite interesting for me in watching the rhetoric since then. The rhetoric is no longer free higher education. The rhetoric from the ANC is free tuition. Now that's something very different. There's a big difference between free tuition and free education. Because outside of tuition, you need accommodation, you need books, you need food, you need healthcare, and so on and so forth. And the terminology is free tuition. And I think it is not a coincidence that in the budget that we got in October, part of the 10 billion that was raised to pay for SAA, I think something like 1 billion came from higher education. I think it tells you clearly where the priorities are.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you about. We have a few minutes left, and I want to talk to you about two things. And the one is SAA. I mean, as a South African, I like the idea that we have a South African Airways. But in the hierarchy of our priorities and our lack of funding, it seems that we've saved SAA at the expense of services, including services to the poor.
No question about it, number one. Number two, air travel is not a public good. It's not like health or security. We shouldn't spend taxpayers' money on it. And thirdly, I have no understanding why SAA couldn't do what Swiss Air did. Swiss Air was insolvent and was put into liquidation in the 2000s. The company disappeared. The name Swiss Air has come back. The Swiss have got their national airline called Swiss Air. And today, I think it is part of Lufthansa. Now, I can't see why you can't do that with SAA. Put the company free liquidation, cancel the obligations. That's the point of liquidation. That's why you have it. You cancel the obligations. And you sell the name to somebody and you rise again. Why we have to pay 10.5 billion for that is completely beyond me. I don't understand it.
Right. JP, the last question I have for you is about NEDLAC. I've been amazed since I've been doing this show at how many people from all walks of life, from community groups to business to economists and so on, have said that NEDLAC is no longer really fit for purpose. NEDLAC, of course, being the forum where social compacts are agreed between business, labor, and government. Is that your view? People say it doesn't represent all of business, it doesn't represent all of labor, it doesn't represent all of NGOs. Is NEDLAC working, or is it a relic of the 1990s that needs to be modernized?
Look, it is a relic. It needs to be modernized. It's not fit for purpose. I agree with all those comments. But there are two issues. The first one is what else? So if you don't do this, what else do you do? I think, and before you say let's abolish NEDLAC, let's first answer that question. What do you replace it with?
Yeah.
That's the one comment. The other comment is President Ramaphosa is very much into this whole social compacting thing. So he's going to drive it. He's going to make sure that all difficult issues go to NEDLAC, and NEDLAC must agree on it. And I don't think that's a bad strategy. Take, for example, the Economic Recovery Plan. The ANC published a plan. COSATU published a plan, Business for South Africa published a plan, a group of academics published a plan, and then the president said, fine, put it all into NEDLAC, go and sort it out, give me one plan.
Right.
And that's what happened, that's what came out. So everybody, will be a little bit unhappy because their favorite pet topics are not in the plan. Everybody will be a little happy because some of their things are there. And I don't really see, John, how else you can drive things in South Africa forward.
Well, that's a good note on which to end. JP Landman, the optimistic economist, thanks for being on the forum, and thank you for watching. Hope to see you again next week. I'm John Mattison.